Hey guys, here I am back once again doing some of these reviews all on my lonesome, which I actually like doing these, to be honest. And I thought it was about time that I did another book review. As I said, I'm still in the middle of reading Slewfoot by Brom. I just really haven't gotten around to like reading that one yet. I guess because I have a physical copy, and I don't know, for some reason that's like harder for me to find a place to sit down and read it. So I actually chose another ebook on my Kindle Unlimited, so hopefully that's not too much of a burden on anybody. Speaking of books, before I get too far into it, let me bring up our affiliate partner for the video today, which would be Audible. Now, obviously, Audible is a subset of Amazon, and it is maybe the world's largest repository of audiobooks and podcasts, any other audio things you might want to listen to. Now, if you would like to subscribe to Audible, there is a link in the description box, and if you click on that link, which is an affiliate link, full disclosure, I get a small commission when you do that and sign up, but if you click that link, you will get a 30-day free trial of Audible. And on top of that, you also get a free credit, which you can spend on whatever you want that you get to keep forever. While you have the 30-day trial, obviously you can listen to whatever you want to listen to on there with no points needed. Also, I want to mention that if you already are an Amazon Prime member, then you will get 2 credits with your subscription. And whatever you spend those on, you can keep those forever, as I said. And the book we're talking about today is on there, obviously, as are many books that I wrote, if you'd like to listen to those as well. So yeah, click on the link down in the description box and sign up for Audible. And it's a really great service. I use it myself, and I would recommend it very highly. So there you go. All right. So the book we're talking about today, I kind of feel like, okay, so like part of the fun of having a Kindle Unlimited subscription, which is also Amazon, if you don't know, that's not an affiliate, but you basically pay, I can't remember how much it is a month, but it's just like it's like maybe $9 a month or $10 or something like that. And there's millions and millions of books available on ebook that you can just read for free. Like not all of them are free, obviously, but there's a huge selection. And so I signed up for that, so I'd always have a ready supply of books to read for book reviews in case I couldn't go and like buy a physical copy. You know what I mean? So, but I found that like part of the fun of having Kindle Unlimited is kind of playing a game that I like to call Kindle Roulette. And basically, once they get a feel for what your tastes are, and like, once you've checked out like so many books, they can give you better recommendations. So I'll just go and kind of browse through all of the, dozens of recommendations they've given me. And I usually just choose a book completely at random. Sometimes just from the title or from the cool looking cover. Sometimes it's if it's from an author that I've read before, but I usually try to pick different authors every time, so I'm not, just reading the same author over and over again, you know what I mean? So I try to pick somebody different. Now, I will say that on occasion, this method of just picking stuff randomly has kind of bitten me in the ass. And I'm thinking in particular of that book I reviewed a little while ago called Hidden Pictures, which was good all together, I guess, like in the beginning, but then started getting a little problematic toward the end. Go back and listen to my review if you want to know what I'm talking about there. But I have to say that most of the time, I end up with something that's pretty entertaining, you know what I mean? And that was absolutely the case with the book we're talking about today. Now, this is a book called The Neighbor, written by London Clarke, who is from South Carolina. She's a South Carolina author. Now, this book actually came out in 2021, I believe. Now, this is actually the first book of hers that I read, and I have to say I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's quite a page turner. I read it just almost, I had to read it in 2 sittings because I didn't have time to like read the whole thing through, but it's like I really didn't want to put it down. I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna read like one more chapter and then I have to do some other shit, and then like that didn't happen. I was like, okay, maybe one more chapter, you know what I mean? So it was one of those kind of things where I couldn't really put it down, And The setup of it, it's kind of cool. I kind of liked this, actually. The setup of it is kind of like a domestic or romantic thriller, like almost like something you'd see on like the Lifetime channel or something like that. You know what I mean? Like one of those kind of true crime, like my husband might be a serial killer type of things. Like it's kind of set up like that. But then it goes like in a more supernatural, dare I say, demonic direction. And I kind of dug that. Like I kind of dug the way that it kind of juxtaposed those two things. I thought it worked out really well. So, what is this book about? So, our main protagonist is named Claire Vogel, and the entire story is told from her perspective. It's in the first person. Now, she is a therapist, like a psychotherapist, and she is the mother of 4 daughters. However, some recent incidents that have taken place in her life have had her own mental health maybe not operating at peak performance. Let's call it that. Now, I believe it's like a year prior to the events of the novel. Her husband, Gunnar, divorced her. And it's made pretty clear that Claire still loves him and kind of maybe low-key hoped that they were going to get back together at some point. However, near the beginning of the story, those hopes are cruelly dashed when Gunnar basically like elopes, or he remarries without warning her, without telling her. Like she finds out from her kids who are like spending their, allotted time with him because they share custody, you know what I mean? Now, this ends up affecting Claire a lot more than she thought it would. Like she tries to like be cool about it and play it off, but it's obvious that she's like really upset because like I said, obviously now, they're not going to get back together, even though she kind of hoped that they would. Now, an interesting thing about Claire is that it seems in times of stress, she has over the years developed something of an odd coping mechanism. Although, I don't know if I want to call it that. I think maybe like escape hatch might be a better term. What she does is she kind of likes to dress up kind of sexy, like not like she would normally dress, you know what I mean? She goes to a bar or someplace where nobody knows her and tries to like pick up random men. Now, she always uses fake names and completely fake details about her life, like about her job and everything like that. She just makes it up out of whole cloth. Now, she never actually goes home with any of these dudes or sleeps with them or anything like that. She just really enjoys pretending to be someone else for a little while and kind of seeing if she can just like flirt with a dude and sort of keep him on the hook with a completely invented persona without having to like go all the way with it. You know what I mean? It seems like a little bit of a weird thing, but that's something that she does. Now, she has actually never told anybody about this proclivity that she has. And to be honest, she seems a little bit ashamed of it, I guess. Like she's a therapist, so she seems like she kind of knows why she does it, but she can't seem to stop herself from doing it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of another intriguing thing, because that's one of the first things that she's introduced doing, like sitting at this bar, like pretending to be somebody else. It's also implied, and in the first part of the story, that Claire might have suffered some type of maybe trauma in her childhood that she's completely repressed the memory of it. But details about that don't kind of come out until later on in the story. You just kind of get flashes where like, visions or dreams or something like that, where she's remembering something that clearly happened to her, but she doesn't really remember what it is. You know what I mean? So this is kind of the setup. And Claire is kind of, she's getting by. She's working as a therapist and being a mom to her 4 kids. Now, there's a little bit of foreshadowing at the beginning of the story where this maybe drunk and or crazed woman starts banging on the door of Claire's house in the middle of the night, screaming for somebody named Patrick, who obviously does not live there because there are no men living in the house. Claire calls the cops. They take the woman away, and even though Claire thinks the whole thing is kind of weird, which obviously it is, she figures, maybe the woman was just confused or wasted and she just went to the wrong house. It's like no big deal, right? So she doesn't really think that much more about it. And the interesting thing is that the reader also kind of forgets about it a little bit until later on when it kind of comes back. You know what I mean? Because it's a long time before like you find out what the deal with that was. Now, the neighborhood that Claire lives in is pretty close-knit. And she participates in a book club, which is really kind of more like a wine mom party that they have every week or whatever, with a bunch of other women who live on the same street. Now, at one of these get-togethers, the women are just all abuzz with news of the new guy in the neighborhood. This very handsome and, seemingly single dude who's renting the house next door to Claire's. Now, she hasn't really seen much of him. Like, the little she's seen of him, like, he's had, like, a hoodie on or sunglasses. She couldn't really tell what he looked like or anything like that. And she's like, look, I just got divorced. I'm not ready for this shit anymore. So it's like she's really not interested, even though you can tell she kind of is still. But she pretends like she's not. But, all the other ladies are, just intrigued and, like, all aflutter about this. Now, it turns out that the guy's name is Steele Nolan, which... seeing that name the first time, I just busted out laughing, because I think that I'm kind of getting the impression that the author is kind of definitely trying to make some sly joke about the romance novel genre, because that is like the most Harlequin romance name that I think I've ever heard. Steele fucking Nolan, you know what I mean? It's just, well, his middle name's not fucking, but you know what I mean. Steele Nolan. I was just kind of like, oh my god, that is such a Fabio name. I was like, I'm sure there's like a whole romance novel, the series, the Steele Nolan. But I think she did that on purpose, you know what I mean? Because, you kind of find out why if you read the book. Now, not surprisingly, Steele Nolan is this big, hunky dreamboat who apparently, like, runs his own construction business. He's got, like, all these teams, and he's kind of working on some places in the area, like some housing developments in the area. And one evening, he kind of, like, pokes his head through Claire's back fence while she's out on her deck, like he's out there smoking or whatever. Now, the fence and her backyard shed were blown down in a storm like a few months before or whatever, and she just hasn't had the time to get around to like fixing it. Now, Steele says, oh, that's no problem at all. I'll fix it all up for you. I'll even rebuild the shed like completely, all for free. Now, Claire, understandably, is pretty reluctant to take him up on this generous offer, because, like, you'd be, like, suspicious, right? It's like, well, what does this dude want in return? You know what I mean? But, she does have to admit that he's very charming, and he seems like a great guy. Like, he doesn't seem, like, obnoxious or pushy, or like he's trying to get something out of her, or nothing like that. He seems, like, pretty chill. And he's basically, like, pretty insistent. Look, I want to do this work for you. I won't let you pay me. I don't expect anything in return. I just like to help people. Please let me do it. And so after a while, she finally, like, gives in. You know what I mean? And lets him. He's like, okay, fine. You can do it if you want to. Now, I know, and you know, that this guy is way too good to be true. And in this case, just as in most of the time in real life, you'd be absolutely correct to think that. He is too good to be true. And as much as Claire tries to fight her feelings for him, she ends up kind of drawn into this real torrid, like, sexual relationship way against her better judgment. And she kind of finds, like, her thoughts are just becoming consumed by him. She can't seem to, like, control herself when he's around. All this kind of stuff. Like, whenever they get together, she's like, okay, this can't happen again. This can't happen again. And then she ends up jumping on the dick anyway. Almost like she's, like, losing control of herself. You know what I mean? Now, Steele, for his part, also claims to be falling for her as well. And even kind of implies that maybe things are starting to get really serious between them. He's like, not to the point where it's like, oh, marriage or anything, but he's like, I'd like to be part of your kids' lives, and I'd like to, I'd like us to move in together, and all this other kind of stuff. So stuff's like getting kind of serious, right? And she's freaking out a little bit, but she also can't stop thinking about him in another way. However, very soon, because this is a horror novel, kind of cracks start to appear in this, blissful, lovey-dovey situation. For one thing, and this was one of the most intriguing things, I loved this setup. Claire has started seeing, because like I said, she's a therapist, she started seeing a new patient named Whitney. And Whitney, like, every time she comes to the office, like, her life events, quite bizarrely, start to mirror Claire's life events. Like, she comes there and goes, oh, this happened and that happened. She's like, that's fucking weird. That's the same thing that happened to me this past week. You know what I mean? It's like, it's super creepy. Like, I don't know why that, like, creeped me out so much, but it really did. I was like, ooh, what's going on there? You know what I mean? And during one of Whitney's sessions, it comes to light that Whitney might also be dating Steele, even though Steele never mentioned that he was seeing anyone else and seemed to imply that he was getting serious about Claire and that they were heading toward exclusivity or whatever. Now, Claire later confronts him about it, and he just vehemently denies, I am not seeing another woman. I don't know what she's talking about. I don't even know her, blah, blah. But Whitney seems to know a lot about him. You know what I mean? So Claire isn't really sure what to think, other than she knows that one of these motherfuckers is lying and she doesn't know which one it is. Now, she eventually gets so desperate that she hires like a private investigator to look into Steele's background. And he comes up with some pretty disturbing information, which I'm not going to spoil. Also, on top of all of this going on, because like I said, that's kind of the setup that's sort of like a domestic thriller, or like I said, something that you would see like on the Lifetime Network, or, you know, like a true crime kind of show or something like that. But there's also a supernatural aspect, because there are also some creepy and very clearly paranormal things happening in Claire's house, such as like random shadows that look like people sort of like moving across the walls, somebody calling her name when nobody is there, like she hears voices and stuff. There is like this stuffed cat that belongs to her daughter, Paris, which seems to kind of like move around on its own and is kind of creepy as shit. And her eldest daughter, whose name is Annalyn, starts acting real weird. Like she starts sleepwalking, like going out in the street in the middle of the night and doing really weird things that she claims not to remember later. And she starts getting real antagonistic and stuff like that, where she wasn't before. Claire also starts seeing this really terrifying man in a leather hat who is clearly not a real person, because he kind of like appears and disappears at will. Like he pops up in the backseat of her car and shit like that. And she starts also having something like real disturbing visions after visiting this weird, mysterious website whose address she finds on this business card that somebody, we don't know who, like left in her car. So crazy stuff also starts happening like in the wider neighborhood as well. Like there's like, for example, at one house, there's this horrific like murder suicide at one of the houses. Another neighbor too, who's this Korean woman named Hayo, she believes that some kind of portal has opened in the neighborhood. And she keeps referring to all these holes in the ground. But for a while, nobody really pays her all that much attention. So as the story goes on and as events get more and more unhinged, Claire is getting kind of more and more desperate, and she ends up having to essentially reassess her non-belief, because she lost her belief in God. Her dad was an exorcist, which kind of plays into the story a little bit later. But she lost her faith, so she kind of has to reassess whether she actually believes in God and demons and things like that. And as shit gets weirder and weirder, she starts consulting like psychics and paranormal investigators and exorcists eventually to kind of get to the bottom of what's happening to her family specifically and the residents of the street at large, because it seems to be infecting like a wider area. She's also kind of dealing with a lot of guilt, I guess, because she suspects that her relationship with Steele was the catalyst for all of these kind of disasters that like followed in, you know, in the wake of it. Now, I read a couple of other reviews of this book, like on Goodreads and Amazon and stuff, and I noticed that more than one person compared it favorably to the movie Poltergeist from 1982. And I would consider that, like, as far as it goes, like, I guess a fairly accurate comparison, in that it's kind of set in an upper middle class suburb and involves kind of dark forces trying to capture the souls of people in the house and in the neighborhood and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's kind of similar to Poltergeist, so I kind of get where that's coming from. I also saw a couple people say that it had a vibe somewhat similar to the Grady Hendrix novel, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I reviewed a while back. And I think that's also a pretty astute assessment. I mean, because in the sense that that's also about a bunch of ladies in a book club who have to fight like a paranormal, like a supernatural being or something like that. So it's kind of similar in that regard, I guess. But The Neighbor has its own thing going on. So it's not really the same as either of those, but it's kind of somewhere in that same ballpark. So if you like that kind of stuff, then you will probably like this as well. So, I mean, for me personally, like I said, I liked this a lot. You know, it's real fast paced, and it really kind of kept my attention like the whole time, and I just couldn't stop reading it, you know. And I really particularly liked how it took some of the tropes of like a romance novel or a domestic thriller, you know, kind of like, oh, you know, recently divorced woman falling for the hot bad boy next door, which is pretty common as far as that goes, like in that genre. And kind of starting with that, but then like going in a supernatural direction with it. I thought that it was a good idea, rather than just, you know, having the guy turn out to be a serial killer or something like that, for example, which, like I said, I think every Lifetime crime movie is like that. Where it's like, I fell in love with this dude and then I found out he was a serial killer, you know what I mean? But this kind of is set up like that, but then it goes in a supernatural direction, which I thought was kind of cool. Now, I will note that there is something of a serial killer aspect in this story, but it's very minor. It's kind of more of like a background plot element than like the main thing, you know what I'm saying? So that is kind of in there, but it factors into the plot a little bit, but not a huge amount. It's mostly supernatural. Now, if I had any criticism, which I have very little criticism of this because I really liked it a lot. But probably my only criticism would be that I feel like a few of the characters were probably like unnecessary, and could have been trimmed out. Like, for example, you know, she had 4 daughters, and I think really 2 of them didn't really do much of anything or didn't really contribute much to the plot. So it's like, I don't know why she necessarily had to have 4 daughters instead of maybe just 2. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, 2 of them were major characters, but the other 2 were just, I don't even remember what their names were. You know what I mean? Also, there was like a couple characters, like, for example, the first psychic that she calls to come to the house, like to deal with whatever this paranormal shit is that's going on in her house. And this first psychic that comes there and says, oh, well, there's nothing here. And I feel like that scene, I mean, that didn't really contribute much to the plot, so I didn't really necessarily think that had to be there. And I'm going to say, too, that, like, the exorcist that gets introduced toward the end didn't really wind up doing much of anything. And I think that he should have been introduced earlier and been more of, like, a character, or he could have been eliminated altogether. But I think it would have been a better idea for him to be, you know, introduced much earlier, because you have the exorcist, but then there's a bunch of paranormal investigators like working in there too. So you could have like just combined all of that into like a couple of characters instead of just adding new characters. You know what I mean? But like I said, that's a very, very minor criticism. It didn't bother me all that much, because overall, I mean, I thought this was a really compelling story. It moved forward. It had a lot of really good momentum. It didn't really slow down for a minute. It was very, like I said, it was really fast paced. No slow spots. Not that I noticed. And I really loved the build up of all the weird details, like who's this spooky man in the leather hat that keeps popping up, and you know, the character of Whitney, her patient, who has exactly the same things happen to her that were happening to Claire, and I'm just like, that's really weird. What's going on there? And I also really liked the kind of slow rollout of information about Steele Nolan that was like coming to light through Claire interacting with the private investigator that she hired, you know what I mean? And each detail just got weirder and weirder. Like, you know, each one was weirder than the last one. So it really kind of like kept you like glued to the page so you could figure out what the fuck, like what exactly this guy's deal is and how does this relate to all this other stuff that's going on. So yeah, so definitely if you really like, you know, you just want to read something that's creepy and kind of fast paced, a supernatural horror with, you know, really good characters and kind of an interesting story angle that's growing out of a standard domestic thriller, but then going in kind of like a demonic sort of direction. I would definitely recommend this. I thought it was really, really good. Seems to have gotten like mostly really, really positive reviews, and I can see why. It's just like a really entertaining horror novel, and it actually had some real scary shit going on in it. And, you know, I just really liked the build up and the mystery and everything like that. So I thought it was pretty great. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read the ebook for free. Or, like I said, if you click down in the description box for a free 30-day trial of Audible, then you can listen to the audiobook. So that would be cool too. So yeah, so I guess I'll wrap it up for this book review. Thanks you guys so much for listening. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff if you haven't done all of that already. And I'll see you guys again on tomorrow night's show. Good night.